most of you have already heard this story. The group of loved ones gathered on that morning to say their goodbyes. A terrible force of destruction had overcome the man they loved. They had seen his body ravaged beyond repair. He had suffered greatly through no fault of his own. And now they just wanted to entrust him to God and release him to death. But when they arrived to see him, they were told shocking news. He is alive. Somehow, by some miracle during the night, a change had happened. There was no need to say goodbye now. The group who gathered could not believe it. They had to see with their own eyes. And when they went into that hospital room, there he was. The swelling on his hands and feet and his face that had made him unrecognizable was gone. The pale color and the coldness of death that had enveloped his skin was replaced by the healthy blush of warmth and rosy cheeks. The machines that had surrounded his body just 2 days before, filtering his blood through dialysis, pumping him full of medicines to keep his heart going and fight infection, were all disconnected. All that remained was a ventilator for his breathing, and even that was becoming unnecessary because more and more he was breathing on his own. We had gathered to say goodbye to Richard Huff. But surprise! Goodbye was no longer an option. This was the closest I have ever come in my years of ministry to understanding how the women might have felt on that Easter morning over 2,000 years ago. When you have your mind set on one direction and you've steeled yourself to do the ritual, and you've convinced yourself that you're doing the best you can do, the most loving thing you can do under tragic circumstances, you even start making plans to go on without this person. But then you hear the unexpected, impossible news that he is no longer on the brink of death, but has in fact made a miraculous recovery overnight. Well, it is an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. For those of you who have never met Richard Huff or heard about what happened to him, he's a member of this congregation who suffered from a house fire nearly 3 weeks ago. He was life-flighted to Lehigh Valley Burn Center in Allentown with severe damage to his lungs, exacerbated by his chronic asthma. It was thought that he would recover in just a few weeks, but suddenly his body began to deteriorate to the point where his kidneys had failed, his blood pressure was bottoming out, his liver enzymes were going through the roof, he was not absorbing nutrition, his lungs were overcome with pneumonia, and his body was in sepsis. It quickly became apparent that the only thing keeping him alive were the machines surrounding his body on all sides, beeping and clicking, pushing air in, pulling air out, pushing blood in, pushing blood out. Richard had a living will clearly stating that he did not want his life prolonged in such a way. So last Wednesday, 4 of us gathered around Richard's bedside. Alice Ann Snyder, Alice's friend Beverly, Richard's daughter Becky, and me. He had been unconscious for over 10 days since he had been put on the ventilator. After the doctors and the nurses explained his condition to us, we agonized over what to do. After much prayer, silence, and open conversation, we decided that we needed to talk to Richard directly. So we came alongside his bed, and we spoke to him, not even sure if he could hear us. But we told him what had happened to him with the fire and what had happened to his body. We told him that in 2 days we were going to gather his family together for a prayer to commend him to God, and then we were going to honor his wishes to end treatment. But we said to him, Rich, if this is not what you want, you need to find some way to let us know. And we are praying for God's will to be done. 2 days later, 10 of us came back to the burn center, expecting to do a service of commendation. Instead, we were told that during the night, his whole health had turned around. He had dramatically improved. The nurses who worked day and night to keep Rich going would not consider themselves angels. But when they shared the news with us that morning, they might as well have been wearing bright white robes and had wings sprouting from their backs. Today, Richard is no longer on dialysis. All his vital signs are stable. He's breathing more and more on his own, and he is beginning to open his eyes. The medical explanation is that his adrenal gland had not been producing cortisol, which is necessary for the chemical reactions in the body. As an asthma patient, his body was used to the medicines that he used constantly, but was apparently going haywire since the fire and he was not taking them. So they took a chance and tried to jumpstart the adrenal gland. There was no guarantee that this was going to work because all of the other bodily functions had failed. But it started a chain reaction that caused a dramatic improvement. As I wrote in an email to the congregation, as people of faith, we call this a miracle. While the outcome is still uncertain and Rich is not out of the woods yet, the speed of his turnaround has been amazing. Overnight, he went from being on the brink of death to being on the road to recovery. There's still a long road ahead for him, but he apparently made his wishes known, and God's will is being done. Even to those who might normally respond to something like this with skepticism, I hear them use the word miracle over and over. A miracle is defined as an extraordinary event manifesting divine intervention in human affairs, an extremely outstanding or unusual event. Time and again, as I've talked about this with people, they've shared with me stories of their own miracles that they've seen or witnessed in their lives. And Rich's story helps to affirm their faith that God is real, God cares, and God works miracles, even today. But one person shared something different with me. She shared with me the story of when her daughter died, and there was nothing that could be done to save her. Even though it happened decades ago, the memory and the pain of what had happened was as real as if it was just last week. And her tears made me pause. In the midst of celebrating Rich's miracle, I had to ask myself, what about those for whom the miracle did not happen? What about those who suffer tragedy and experience no surprise of joy? what does Jesus' resurrection mean for them? And then I thought some more about this woman. Despite her grief, she found the strength to get up the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, and every morning since that terrible day when her daughter collapsed in her arms. She and her husband continued to raise their children. They continued attending church, despite an event that would make most people want to curse God and abandon their faith. But Sunday after Sunday, she is here, serving her church, reading her Bible, hugging little girls who were about the same age as when her daughter died. And it dawned on me, there was a miracle after all. Because she's still here. She kept going. She did not lose her faith, and she believes as strongly in the power of Jesus' resurrection as Richard Huff does. What I began to realize is that there are different kinds of miracles. Some of them come upon us unexpectedly, suddenly, overwhelming us with surprising joy. And some of them unfold slowly, over time, over days and months, like the petals of a slow-blooming flower, opening up over time, like a butterfly whose chrysalis falls away bit by bit over time to reveal a miraculous butterfly inside. God's power to heal, to forgive, to transform, to sustain is not limited to one morning 2,000 years ago in a garden outside of Jerusalem. God's power shone so clearly on that day through the resurrection of Jesus is meant for your life right now. It's meant for our church right now. It's meant for our earth right now. It's meant for everyone right now. You may feel that you are still locked in a tomb that is sealed with a stone that can never be moved. But it may be that you are at the center of a bud, at the center of a cocoon, and it is beginning to slowly open up all around you. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. Amen.